Um, life is crazy, isn't it? Life is full of unexpected things. And today I was thinking about the message and trying to get some thoughts together. I think that one of the things about life is that it's full of questions. And the questions that come at us sometimes are predictable but uninvited. I don't want them. Or sometimes they're just frankly unavoidable. But regardless, questions can be like that, just these surprising, unexpected questions we just can't avoid. One of them that I can remember when I was in high school, since we have high school grads today, one that I can remember from high school was I got up on a Saturday morning and my mom was great. She made breakfast for me, which was awesome. She often did. And she said, "Were you at the drive-in last night?" Now that troubled me. That particular question troubled me because a couple of things. One, my mom didn't drive, so how does she know anything? There's no way for her to have been there, so that doesn't make any sense. The other thing that bothered me was that I had the only car in the family for my date, which is the family car. And so Dad couldn't have been there. But it is true that the rule was that I couldn't take the family car to the drive-in. Not because of what you think, notoriously I might have done, but because he didn't want it to get dirty on those dusty drive-in roads. He was pretty much about keeping the car clean. So, I got busted. I found out that my mom knew I was there because she had lived in my hometown her whole life. And she had spies everywhere. And she was networked in better than the CIA. It was amazing. When we live our lives, there are questions that we know are coming, but we don't know how to answer them. For example, I'm thinking the graduates again today. Questions like, what are you going to do after school? What's your major going to be? Those kinds of questions you really can't dodge. They're going to come to you uninvited. So a lot of people, I was amazed that Nathan knows what he wants to study. Some of us are going, how did he know? Supply chain and all that kind of stuff, that's awesome. These questions come unexpected sometimes, or just really annoyingly so. You might be at a family gathering and you get a question something like this. So, when are you going to make me a grandmother? And if you want me to ask that on your behalf, I can with other people. So these are the kinds of questions that come. Now, the question that we're going to look at today is one of those questions you can't dodge. It's one of those questions that comes to you and you dare not dodge it or ghost it. It comes to people in various settings, in different places. It sometimes comes to you in a hospital room when you're really hurting or someone you love is hurting. It can come to you in a traffic jam and you're just sitting there listening to the radio and something provokes this question. Sometimes it comes late at night when you cannot sleep, and this question just shows up, stabbing you awake. It comes to people who are at their lowest and maybe feel they've hit bottom, and it's a question that sometimes comes to people who feel like they got the tiger by the tail and that everything's going well. It comes to sinners, and it comes to saints. And it's a very simple question. Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? That's the question for today. I think Matthew has orchestrated the passage so that it is the question that his readers would ask. It's the question that Jerusalem asked on Palm Sunday, what we call Palm Sunday, and it's the question that you and I need to ask because It's a question that never times out. It's always the right question to ask. In fact, if there's one thing that I would challenge you to remember, the one thing that Pastor Brooks wants you to take away, well, my one thing today is the most life-changing question you will ever ask is, who is Jesus? That is the most life-changing, transformative, formative question you could ever ask. Now, we are in Matthew chapter 21, and if you have a Bible, that's awesome. Turn to Matthew 21, first book of the New Testament. If you're one of those screen people that likes to look at your phone or something else, I don't judge you. Go ahead and pull up your application and get to Matthew 21. It'll be great. It'll be great. Now, we've been in Matthew for a while, and as we hit Matthew 21, it's really kind of a turning point because this is the beginning of the last week of Jesus' life. And Matthew's going to take his time unpacking what happens here. Matthew can be organized in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that you can organize it is around 5 messages, 5 sermons that Jesus gave. So if you're kind of thinking your way through Matthew, there's the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes that you're so familiar with, and then there's the chapter 10 and the sending of the 12 in their mission chapter in ministry. There is chapter 13 full of parables, starting with the parable of the soils. And then chapter 18 that we looked at not too long ago about life with the king and what it's like to be in the kingdom and how we treat one another. And then later on, there's going to be this whole ministry and message of sermon about the last things that's coming up. But right now, today, we're at this crucial turning point. Jesus arriving in Jerusalem, the last week of his life, and he's entering the city. If you would, I'd invite you to listen. I'm going to read the first 11 verses of chapter 21, and then we'll kind of unpack this. But before I do that, let me help you with your imagination on this, okay? This is a narrative. This is a story. So, how many people here have ever rode in RAGBRAI? 1. Wait a minute. 2. Okay, so all the way, I'm not asking all the way, maybe for one day, maybe for 5 miles, maybe just to hang out in the food truck or to supply adult beverages to people. I get that, okay? So I want you to imagine what's going on. So last year, RAGBRAI rode across the northern tier of Iowa counties. And in doing that, they came to Forest City for one of their overnights. Now, last year was not a record number of RAGBRAI riders, but it was 40,000 people. It was 40,000 people. People riding bikes and people doing other things. And they came to Forest City in the course of the circuit given them. And do you know how many people live in Forest City? 4,500. So you're living in Forest City and you see this thundering herd coming at you. Coming out of the west and heading east right after you. And you're going, my goodness, how are we going to handle this? 40,000 people going to camp overnight in a town of 4,500. Now, the parallel is this. The parallel is that this is what's happening in Jerusalem. Jerusalem every year has a Passover. It's not exactly RAGBRAI, but it's something like that. And they come to celebrate Passover from all over. They come from the northern kingdom. They come from Galilee and Samaria. They come from all over the Roman Empire, where all the Jews have been dispersed over the centuries, and they're coming to Jerusalem. Now, I'm a nerd, okay, so just let me to nerd out just for a second here, or maybe even longer should I, feel the urge. Anyhow, one of my favorite authors is a fellow named Joachim Jeremias. Joachim Jeremias. He's a German scholar who's passed away now, but he was famous for mastering rabbinic Hebrew and all the ancient sources. And the book that he wrote other books, but the book that everyone knows is Jerusalem in the Time of Jesus. And it's a fascinating read for those who are nerdy. I would not recommend it to most of you, but it's a great read. It's a great read. Here's what Joachim Jeremiah says. He says that at the time of Jesus, in the first century, does anyone want to guess how many people lived in Jerusalem? More than Forest City, I'll give you that. But 30,000 people. 30,000 people. Now, on the average, that's from all the records he's able to assemble, around 30,000 people. Now, also, because he studied this, what he points out is this: 180,000 people every year came to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. And most of them came the path that Jesus came up through the mountain, and then off to the Kidron Valley, and then coming into Jerusalem. So I want you to see this scene. It's Jesus and pilgrims coming to Passover, a town of 30,000 people, greeting 180,000 people who are literally going to be camping all over. So that's what's happening. So as I read this, if you can keep that in mind, it might help you. It might help you. So here's the word of God in Matthew 21. Now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them at once." This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. That's the first piece. The second comes now with the crowds, the pilgrims. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went before him and that followed him were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowds said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." Here's a simple way to organize your thinking as you listen to this message, but also as you read these 11 verses. It's going to be 3 groups, 1 question. 3 groups, 1 question, and the applicational question for all of us today will be, what's our answer? 3 groups, 1 question, 1 answer. So let's start with the first group. The first group is the disciples. The disciples' answer is, "We obey." Now this is somewhat striking and surprising because Jesus has given them instructions and they go and do it. They don't always go and do it. They sometimes have all kinds of, him and haw, and there's pushback and things like that. But they are anonymous. We don't know which disciples. I think that's Matthew's point. And they actually go and do it. Now, here's what we do know about the larger context. They obey to the letter what Jesus asked them to do. But we know as we read on, and as we have read before, they don't know really what they're all about. They really, when they say that Jesus is king, they don't fully understand what that means. They have all kinds of their own kind of imported meanings about greatness and servanthood, which Jesus talks about in Matthew 20. They are going to fall asleep when their king is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. And when he is arrested, when their king is arrested, they're going to scatter. So do they really get it? Not 100%. John actually will say in John chapter 12, if you want to look it up sometime, I think 12:16, he's going to say, they did not know as they entered Jerusalem what this was all about. It wasn't until after the resurrection of Jesus that it made sense to them. Here's the application, though. For us who want to follow Jesus, and when we answer the question, Jesus is king, when we answer that question, Jesus is king, here's what I think we have to keep in mind. Jesus is king, and that's enough. Jesus is king, and that's enough. Now, some of us are wired in certain ways, I'm one of them, that I want to know everything about Jesus before I obey. I want to know everything. I want all my whys answered. I want all of my questions fully explained. I want to master that truth. But I think what Matthew is saying is that in the walk with Jesus Christ as disciples, we have to have a willingness to obey completely while having incomplete knowledge. Can you obey Jesus without fully understanding all that's going on? This complete obedience. That, I think, is pictured here in a beautiful way. They do exactly what Jesus asked them to do. And it's repeated in a way that says, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Think about it. We're Americans for the most part, right? I don't know. We have pretty good security, so we usually check. But I think everyone got carded on the way in. So we're Americans, and Americans don't like to lose control. Don't ask us to do something if you can't explain it to us. Don't ask us to do something if it's going to, we're going to have to oblige ourselves to something and be obligated. What we normally do if there's an event that requires us to sign up ahead of time, RSVP, we say, well, yeah, I don't want to do that until like the very last minute, because I don't want to be out of control and I'm not really sure I'm going to make it, and so I don't want to have to be obliged. So control and responding in obedience is hard for us. And even if we weren't Americans and we weren't that way, just in our nature it's like that. So think about this. I don't have an exact memory of this, but I'm sure versions of this happened repeatedly growing up. Imagine me at 10 or 11, okay? I know, scary thought, but you should be able to kind of dismiss that memory by this evening you'll fall asleep, okay? But right now it's troubling. So imagine me at 10 or 11, and my dad tells me to do something. About that age, 10 or 11, I think my response to everything my dad asked me to do was one word: why? 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 And I think my dad repeated this answer over and over again. His answer to my question why was, I'm your dad. He didn't do explanations. He just said, I'm your dad. A lot of our living, loving, and giving the way Jesus lives, loves, and gives is like that. We don't fully understand its implications. We just know this is what he wants us to do. And we maybe have some inkling as to what why is all about, but even if we don't, we should obey completely, even with incomplete knowledge. In the marketplace, my work is primarily in the marketplace with businesses, and one of the phrases that you'll hear in the marketplace, and you'll hear it often, is that I wish the people that work for me had a bias for action. I wish they had a bias for action. What the followers of Christ are called to do is have a bias for obedience. That's how. Where's our bias for obedience? It comes in a variety of settings. So the challenge, the invitation of this first group, Jesus is king is their answer, and that's enough. That is enough. So what do you want us to do? And we'll do it. That's the call. That's the call. So that's the first piece of this. I'll come back to Zechariah towards the end of the message, but I want you to understand that first group. Now let's move to the second group. The second group is what I would call the crowds. And the crowd's answer is discerned by what they say. Now, they are, I think, primarily not residents of Jerusalem at all. And Matthew, I think, underscores that because he says that the crowds went before Jesus and after him. And Jesus is like a Jesus sandwich. He's in the middle, right? And there's these crowds, and these are all pilgrims, and they're all coming. They don't live in Jerusalem. They're all coming. And so these are the crowds. And they're from all over the Roman Empire, and they're from northern Galilee, and they're coming. And we get a glimpse as to what they're all about by what they shout. And what they shout is something they've been singing on the road. Now, these people traveled a long ways. Jesus and his disciples came from Caesarea Philippi all the way to Jerusalem. That was a 100-mile walk. So these people have been walking, and part of the ways they did it was they would sing as they walked, and they would sing these songs, and they would sing psalms that they called Hallel psalms, which are the songs of ascent as they went up to Jerusalem. And one of them is Psalm 118. And they had been singing 118, which actually repeats these words of Hosanna. Hosanna, glory to him in the highest. And so this has been on their lips. And here they are, and they've been singing it. And really what they're doing is, I hope Jesus is king. I hope Jesus is king. And I think they're hoping maybe not even that Jesus is king. I'm hoping all these people are right about Jesus. I'm joining in. We often imitate what others do, especially in our walk in the church, because that's instinctively, but it doesn't mean that we have that in us. We're just kind of watching and kind of learning that way. Here's a video that illustrates how instinctively we imitate others to get the response that we're hoping for. Isn't that great? That is so true to human life, right? That's just us. So what's happening in the crowd? The crowd is saying, Hosanna. Blessed be the Son of David. Mighty warrior. Blessed is him who comes in the name of the highest. They're saying all these things. Some of them undoubtedly knew what they were saying and believed it from their heart. Some of them were just saying, I'm singing along. You guys are singing this. I kind of like this. My hope is that Jesus is a mighty warrior and he will rescue us from the Romans. That's my hope. I'm not necessarily saying I've got sin to confess. I'm not saying I need mercy from God. I'm just saying, man, if he can do anything about the Romans and rescue us and get the taxation that's driving us crazy in Galilee, yes, Hosanna in the highest. I think they're simply imitating the hope of others. So they're borrowing hope. I don't think that's necessarily bad if you know that's what you're doing or if you come to an awareness of that. Because at some point you need to realize it has to be mine. I can't borrow this from somebody else. We have seen this. We have graduates today, Jonathan and Nathan. One of the things that often happens is that when people move from a dynamic congregation where we really, heard these words and understood and sang them, that sometimes what happens is that they move from a congregation like we have here, which we're blessed immeasurably by, and they move to another place and it's not like that. Do you know what happens to their faith? Sometimes it falls apart. Because they were more interested in the things that Jesus might do for them than Jesus. And Jesus wants the relationship first and foremost. It's not about what I can do about the Romans. It's not about any of that. It's about who Jesus is and the relationship he wants for us. And so it sometimes happens to graduates, it happens to people when they get jobs in new cities, and they just are not part of a congregation, and they realize that their hope was borrowed. It had never become theirs. I hope that you would today just examine your heart and say, hey, maybe that's it. I just love the singing, and I know the language, and I'm able to kind of pray if they force me to, but I don't want to. I'm hesitant to ever tell anybody about Jesus, but this is a great place, and these people are loving. They accept me the way I am. That's awesome. It truly is. But I pray that you would say, do I have borrowed hope, or have I put my hope in Jesus? So, 2 groups, 1 to go. First group, Jesus is king, and that's enough. I will obey. Incomplete knowledge, but I will obey. Second group, the crowds. They're caught up in the moment. It's exciting. It's thousands of people. This never happens in our little villages. This is amazing, and yes, let's sing this together. But is it borrowed hope? Their answer is, Jesus is king, I hope. And I hope he does something about the Romans, the thing that bothers me the most. The last group here is people of Jerusalem. And it kicks off when Jesus enters Jerusalem. This is in verses 10 and 11. And in this moment, I think really Matthew, in a beautiful way, has arranged the story so that it lands on this question. And it lands on this question with the group that is most resistant to Jesus. And so it's beautifully constructed. And what happens is that the whole city is stirred, and they ask the question, who is this? Who is Jesus? The word stirred is interesting. More Bible nerd alert, so you can just kind of check your watch if you need to right now, but a little nerdy moment here. The word stirred is a word that seismus, we get seismic activity when earthquakes happen. It's a word that shows up in English, but it's really about earthquake and everything being shaken. It's going to show up 3 times in the Gospel of Matthew. It shows up here first, and then it's going to show up at the crucifixion of Jesus when there is an earthquake and everything is shaken, and then at the resurrection when it's shaken up. But this is just Jesus showing up, and that's enough to create an earthquake. That's enough to do it. By the way, Jesus, when he shows up in your life, he will mess with you. He will stir the pot. He will. The first time Jesus shows up in Jerusalem, or the mention of Jesus shows up in Jerusalem, is in Matthew chapter 2. And it's when the Magi, the wise men, come and they're seeking the one who is born King of the Jews. And it's early in that chapter, verse 3, maybe something like that. And in verse 3, if I'm right, it says, when Herod heard this, he was deeply troubled. And I like the next phrase, and all of Jerusalem with him. Now Jesus is showing up again, and he's fulfilling the prophecies of Zechariah. And he's coming, and he is, behold your king, and this place is stirred up again. What's going to happen? This is the answer I think Jerusalemites, citizens would give. Is Jesus king? I hope not, because he means trouble. He's going to blow up our status quo. We've got a good thing going here. It's not a great thing, but it's a good thing, and some of us have learned how to make peace with the fact that the Romans are in charge. It's a good thing. We do not need him to blow up our system. It means trouble. Right here in Jerusalem City. It starts with a T and it rhymes with P, and it stands for, okay, I'm not sure what it stands for. Some of you know your musical theater. So, that's their answer. That's their answer. What do we do here? Jesus is king, and that's enough. Jesus might be king, maybe he'll do something about the things I'm worried about. Jesus means trouble. He's going to blow up how I live my life and how I spend my money and all kinds of things and how I talk to people and who I associate with and what I do. And yes, true. But remember that passage from Zechariah earlier where it is quoted for us. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you. And here are key words: humble, humble, and mounted on a donkey. He's a king that does not ride a warrior horse. He is a king that rides a donkey. And he rides into town humble. Matthew taught us about that earlier when he quoted Jesus saying that, come and learn of me because I am humble and gentle and lowly of heart. He may cause you trouble, but he is the best kind of trouble you will ever meet. He is the best kind of trouble because he is gentle. And he will teach you what it means to seek mercy from a person that wants to give you mercy. Elsewhere in Zechariah, it says they will look upon him whom they have pierced. In Zechariah 12, I think. And they will mourn. This is all part of the story that Zechariah foretold. Jesus has your best in mind. Trust him. Sell out to him. Bring it all. Lay it all on him. He's not trouble, and he's not just a ATM to get you what you want. He is the king, and he is the merciful king. Here's an old preacher story. And I'm old, so I can tell an old preacher story. Maybe you've heard it. It's the story of the lumberjack and the bird. The lumberjack was assigned to cut down a bunch of trees in a grove. And so he goes and he begins to work on the first tree. And as he works on the first tree, he hears squawking up there in the tree branches. And it's a bird, squawking at him because this bird had already started to build a nest there. And he is humble and gentle. He's not a rough and tough lumberjack. He's a thoughtful and caring lumberjack. And so he wants the bird to move. And so he grabs a pine cone and he throws it at the bird. And he keeps shaking the tree until the bird moves on. And so he cuts down the tree. And he goes to the next tree and he starts cutting it. And sure enough, that bird had left that tree and now was in this other tree. Oh, well, what have I got to do? So I'm shaking the tree as best I can, throwing stuff at it. And I get the bird to move and I cut down the tree. And this repeats over and over again as he moves from one tree to the next tree. He cuts down the tree, but the bird is always choosing the next tree over, and he's up there trying to build. She's trying to build a nest or something. And finally he goes to a tree and he starts cutting it, and there's no squawking. The bird's not yelling, screaming at him. And he looks over to his left. And he sees the bird is building a nest on a rocky cliff. Got it, bird. You figured it out. You don't want to build your life on something that's going to be cut down. That's not us. You don't want that at all. You want the king who in his mercy humbly rides a donkey into your life and says, trust me. Don't understand it all, that's fine. Just obey. Trust me. Don't turn me into something that gets you what you want. Trust me into someone who gets you what you need. Trust me. World's troubled. You've been building on trees. Your nest will fall down someday. Trust me. That's what happens when the king arrives. Let's bow in prayer. Blessed God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. We give you thanks and praise. Teach us what it means to follow Christ, to live, love, and give like he does. And that it's the best place for us to build our lives. In his name we pray. Amen.